In the dark forest of toxic relationships, you may find yourself walking a path that seems to have no end. The narcissist in your life has constructed a maze where every turn leads back to their needs, their demands, their reality. You've tried reasoning, pleading, explaining. You've attempted to be more understanding, more patient, more giving, yet somehow you remain trapped in this endless cycle where your needs evaporate like morning dew, while theirs tower like mountains that must be climbed. What if I told you that the exit has always been there? Not in changing them, but in transforming how you navigate this labyrinth of manipulation and control. If you find value in these reflections on reclaiming your power, please consider subscribing to join our community of seekers on the path to self-mastery. The future doesn't matter if you are not there. Your business doesn't matter if you are not there. You cannot enjoy your family if you are not there. So, the whole point I would like to point out is apparently there is something about you. Have you ever pleaded with a narcissistic person in your life to change? Perhaps you found yourself exhausted, sitting across from them at yet another emotional standoff, thinking, if only they could see how they're hurting me. You've tried countless approaches, speaking softly, raising your voice, writing letters, sending texts with precise explanations of your feelings. You've researched personality disorders, shared articles, suggested therapy. You've compromised so much of yourself that you barely recognize who you've become, yet nothing changes. This is because you're attempting to solve a puzzle with pieces that don't exist. The narcissist's personality is not merely a set of behaviors they choose, it is the structure of their psychological makeup. Consider this question. Could you fundamentally change your personality if someone asked you to? If you are naturally introverted, could you permanently become extroverted by tomorrow? If you are highly empathic, could you simply turn off your ability to feel others' emotions? Of course not. Your personality has been forming since childhood, shaped by countless experiences, genetic predispositions, and years of reinforcement. It is now the lens through which you experience and respond to the world. The narcissist's rigid personality structure is even more resistant to change than yours. Their defense mechanisms, denial, projection, rationalization, form an impenetrable shield against self-reflection. And perhaps most importantly, their personality works for them. Their manipulation gets them what they want. Their ability to make others feel small makes them feel large. Their grandiosity protects them from the painful vulnerability of authentic connection. Think of Maria, a talented project manager who spent years trying to please her narcissistic supervisor. She came in earlier, stayed later, answered weekend emails within minutes. When criticized in public, she worked twice as hard to prove her worth. When her ideas were stolen, she created better ones. She spent sleepless nights rehearsing conversations, preparing perfect responses to his unpredictable moods. Still, nothing was ever good enough. One day, after a particularly brutal meeting where he took credit for her quarterly strategy, Maria had a revelation. Her supervisor's behavior wasn't about her performance at all. It was about his fundamental need to feel superior, regardless of what she did or didn't do. This wasn't a communication problem she could solve by finding the right words. This was his personality, functioning exactly as designed. The weight of this realization was simultaneously crushing and liberating. Crushing because it meant that the validation and recognition she deeply craved would never come from him. Liberating because it meant she could stop the exhausting work of trying to change him. This is what I call the first step toward radical acceptance. The recognition that the narcissist's personality is not something you can fundamentally change. You can influence specific behaviors in specific moments, but you cannot transform their core personality structure, their emotional processing, or their capacity for empathy. This doesn't mean giving up or surrendering your power. Rather, it means directing your energy where it can actually create change within yourself. It means shifting your focus from how can I make them treat me better to how can I respond differently to protect my well-being. Ask yourself, how much of your precious life energy has been consumed by trying to change someone who cannot and will not change? What might be possible if you redirected that energy toward your own growth, your own dreams, your own healing? What might emerge if you stopped trying to convince them to see your reality and instead fully honored your own perceptions? The path forward begins with this radical shift in perspective. It's not about giving them more chances to hurt you. It's about giving yourself permission to step out of the cycle entirely. There is the tendency that a lot of things are being outsourced to everybody else, to institutions, to other people, which lie outside of you. Either we look out for somebody able to give us something, or if something is going wrong, we look for someone that we can blame. If you possess a naturally agreeable personality, Kind, empathic, trusting, conflict avoidant, you may wonder why you continually find yourself entangled with narcissistic personalities. This is not coincidence or bad luck. This is strategic targeting. Research shows that highly agreeable people are prime targets for narcissistic manipulation. Your natural inclination toward compassion, your willingness to see others' perspectives, your tendency to blame yourself first, these beautiful qualities become vulnerabilities when encountered by someone skilled in exploitation. Consider this thought experiment. How easily could you transform yourself into someone manipulative, entitled, attention-seeking, and hostile? Could you walk into a grocery store tomorrow and begin berating a clerk for moving too slowly? Could you start conversations with strangers by boasting about your accomplishments? Could you deliberately hurt someone's feelings without remorse? If you're cringing at these scenarios, that's precisely the point. Your moral compass prevents you from behaving this way. Your empathy makes such behavior unthinkable. This is the fundamental asymmetry in your relationship with a narcissist. While you cannot imagine being cruel, they cannot imagine prioritizing your needs above their own. Yet, many victims of narcissistic abuse continue to blame themselves. If only I had communicated better, they think. If only I had been more patient, more understanding, more forgiving. This self-blame becomes a trap that keeps you engaged in the toxic dynamic, constantly trying to perfect yourself in hopes that the narcissist will finally treat you with basic human dignity. The truth is both simpler and more difficult to accept. The problem isn't you, it never was. Just as you cannot fundamentally change your agreeable nature overnight, they cannot suddenly develop empathy or emotional maturity. This doesn't excuse their behavior. It merely explains the futility of expecting transformation. I witnessed this dynamic with a woman in my healing community. For 15 years, she tried everything to improve her marriage to a narcissistic husband. She attended therapy alone because he refused to join. She read relationship books and implemented every communication technique. She forgave countless betrayals and swallowed her needs to keep peace. When nothing worked, she concluded there must be something deeply wrong with her. After our work together, she finally understood. Her husband wasn't failing at being a good partner despite his best efforts. He was succeeding at maintaining control, which was his true priority. Her problem wasn't poor communication skills, it was that she was communicating with someone incapable of mutual respect and emotional reciprocity. This realization is the foundation of radical acceptance. It means acknowledging that the narcissist's behavior reflects their limitations, not your worthiness. It means understanding that their criticism says more about their need to feel superior than about your actual qualities. It means accepting that the warmth, validation, and genuine connection you seek will never consistently come from this person. Radical acceptance doesn't mean approving of their behavior or remaining in harmful situations. Rather, it means seeing reality clearly so you can make decisions based on what is, not on what you wish could be. It means freeing yourself from the exhausting cycle of trying to earn respect that should be freely given. Ask yourself, how much of your self-worth has become dependent on the validation of someone incapable of validation? What parts of yourself have you abandoned in pursuit of an impossible standard? What would it feel like to accept that no amount of personal growth or perfect behavior on your part will fundamentally change how they treat you? When you stop blaming yourself for the narcissist's behavior, you reclaim your power to define your own worth. Sensual desire arises in the moment when you are paying attention to something that is giving you a positive emotion. This positive emotion can originate from 5 gates of your body: seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, or feeling. Many people caught in narcissistic relationships experience a peculiar form of cognitive dissonance. You observe patterns of manipulation, dismissal, and emotional cruelty, yet you simultaneously doubt your own perceptions. Am I overreacting? You wonder. Is it really that bad? Maybe I'm the problem. This doubt is often deliberately cultivated by the narcissist through tactics like gaslighting, projection, and intermittent reinforcement. Over time, your confidence in your own reality becomes so fragile that you no longer trust your instincts. To break through this fog of confusion, I recommend what I call the communication test, a one-time strategic approach to gain clarity. This is not about confronting the narcissist or labeling their behavior. It's about speaking your truth clearly and non-accusatorily, then carefully observing their response. Here's how it works. Choose a calm moment to express a simple, reasonable need or boundary. Use I statements to avoid triggering defensiveness. For example, I felt uncomfortable when you criticized me in front of our friends last night. In the future, I'd appreciate if we could discuss concerns privately. A non-narcissistic person might respond with empathy. I'm sorry I hurt you. I didn't realize how that came across, but I understand now. I'll be more mindful going forward. A narcissistic person, however, will typically respond in one of several predictable ways. They might deny reality. That never happened. You're making things up again. They might blame you. You're too sensitive. If you weren't so insecure, this wouldn't be an issue. They might deflect. You're bringing this up now? What about when you embarrassed me at dinner last month? They might play victim. I can't believe you think I would deliberately hurt you. After everything I've done for you, this is the thanks I get. The purpose of this test isn't to change their behavior. It's to give you the clarity you need. When you express a simple need and are met with denial, blame, deflection, or victimhood rather than understanding, you have valuable information about the nature of your relationship. Remember Maria, our project manager, after her realization about her supervisor, she decided to try this communication test. During their next one-on-one meeting, she calmly stated, "I've noticed that when I present ideas in team meetings, they're often dismissed, but when reintroduced later by others, they're well received. This is affecting my confidence and contribution. I'd appreciate your support in acknowledging my input during discussions." Her supervisor immediately became defensive. "Are you accusing me of something? I can't control how the team responds to ideas. Maybe if your presentations were more compelling, people would remember they came from you." In that moment, Maria had her answer. A reasonable request for professional support had been twisted into an attack on her competence. This wasn't a misunderstanding that better communication could fix. It was a fundamental pattern of invalidation and control. The communication test works because it bypasses the endless cycle of trying to determine intentions. It doesn't matter whether the narcissist is deliberately manipulative or genuinely unaware of their impact. What matters is how they respond when given an opportunity to hear your needs and respect your boundaries. Importantly, you only need to conduct this test once. Continuing to communicate openly with someone who has demonstrated they cannot hear you only invites further harm. Once the pattern is clear, your focus should shift to protecting your well-being through boundaries, disengagement, and emotional detachment. Ask yourself, what have been your experiences when expressing needs to the narcissist in your life? Have you been met with understanding and adjustment, or with defensiveness and blame? What might change if you trusted this evidence rather than continuing to hope for a different outcome? When you stop trying to communicate with someone who refuses to truly hear you, you reclaim the energy that has been drained by fruitless explanations and desperate attempts to be understood. Ill will describes the state of the mind that arises from negative emotions. In that state of the mind, you have an aversion, a rejection, or simply a dislike against either an object, a situation, or can be even a person. There's an ancient proverb that says, "He who sups with the devil should have a long spoon." When you must interact with a narcissist, whether a co-parent, family member, colleague, or boss, this wisdom becomes your shield. The long spoon symbolizes maintaining sufficient emotional distance to prevent being burned by their toxic behavior. In practice, this means developing a strategic approach to necessary interactions. First, you must recognize that emotional engagement with a narcissist almost inevitably leads to harm. They thrive on provoking reactions, then using those reactions to paint you as unstable or unreasonable. Your emotions become weapons they use against you. The long spoon creates distance between your vulnerable inner self and their manipulative tactics. Begin by identifying which interactions are truly necessary and which are optional. Can you communicate through email rather than emotionally charged in-person conversations? Can you decline social events where the narcissist tends to create drama? Can you delegate certain interactions to third parties? Every optional interaction you eliminate reduces your exposure to manipulation. For necessary interactions, prepare mentally beforehand. Visualize yourself surrounded by an invisible shield that prevents their words from penetrating your emotional core. Remind yourself of their predictable patterns so their behavior doesn't catch you off guard. Set clear internal boundaries about what topics you will and won't discuss. During the interaction, practice emotional detachment. Keep conversations brief, factual, and goal-oriented. Avoid sharing personal information, vulnerabilities, or emotional reactions that can be used against you later. When provocative statements arise, respond with neutral phrases like "I see" or "I understand that's your perspective," rather than defending yourself. Perhaps most importantly, implement what therapists call the gray rock technique. becoming as uninteresting and unreactive as a grey rock. Narcissists seek emotional fuel, whether positive or negative, by providing minimal engagement, maintaining a neutral tone, and avoiding both conflict and intimacy. You become a less appealing target. Maria applied this strategy to her interactions with her narcissistic supervisor. She limited one-on-one meetings to scheduled times only. She communicated primarily through email to create a paper trail. During meetings, she kept her responses professional but minimal, avoiding personal disclosures or emotional reactions. When her supervisor attempted to provoke her with criticism, she responded with simple acknowledgement rather than defensiveness. "I appreciate the feedback," or "I'll take that into consideration." Over time, she noticed her supervisor's interest in targeting her diminished. Without the emotional reactions he sought, their interactions became more predictable and less destructive. This didn't transform him into a supportive leader, but it significantly reduced her stress and protected her sense of self. The long spoon strategy requires practice and consciousness. In moments of stress or vulnerability, you may instinctively slip back into emotional engagement. When this happens, be gentle with yourself. Return to your center, reconnect with your boundaries, and extend that long spoon once again. This approach may initially feel cold or inauthentic, especially for naturally warm, open people. Remember that you are not becoming like the narcissist. You are protecting your light from someone who would diminish it. You're not abandoning your capacity for connection. You're selectively applying it where it can flourish rather than be exploited. Ask yourself, in what specific interactions with the narcissist do you find yourself most emotionally vulnerable? What topics reliably lead to feeling manipulated or diminished? How might you restructure these interactions to maintain greater emotional distance? What would change if you stopped expecting or seeking emotional validation from these exchanges? When you master the art of the long spoon, you reclaim control over your emotional landscape. You're no longer at the mercy of their unpredictable moods or manipulative tactics. You're engaged, but not entangled, present, but not vulnerable. The Shaolin approach is a little bit different. We are overcoming the suffering. We are not running away from the suffering. You are overcoming it. You go through it until you have become so strong. Your body becomes so strong. Your mind has become so strong that it doesn't matter afterwards anymore. When provoked by a narcissist, your instinct may be to fight back with equal force, to match their accusations with your own, their manipulation with your cleverness, their cruelty with your anger. This is a natural response to being attacked, yet it's precisely the response they seek. Narcissists excel at drawing others into conflict, then using the ensuing emotional chaos to portray themselves as victims and you as unstable. They are seasoned fighters, practiced in the arts of projection, gaslighting, and emotional manipulation. When you try to beat them at their own game, you enter a rigged contest where they define the rules and shift them at will. Instead, I propose a more powerful approach, fighting fire with grace. Grace in this context doesn't mean weakness or submission. It means possessing such inner strength that you refuse to be pulled into their drama. It means maintaining your dignity and integrity even when they attempt to strip you of both. It means responding to hostility with calm, to accusations with silence, to manipulation with unwavering truth. Consider this scenario. A narcissistic ex-partner sends a barrage of accusatory texts, blaming you for the relationship's failure and demanding immediate responses. Fighting fire with fire would mean responding with your own accusations, perhaps, pointing out their infidelities or emotional abuse. Fighting fire with grace means either not responding at all or offering a brief, composed reply. "I understand you're upset. I need to disengage from this conversation now." This approach infuriates narcissists because it denies them the emotional fuel they seek. When you remain calm in the face of their provocations, you demonstrate that they no longer have power over your emotional state. Your serenity becomes a mirror reflecting their dysfunction back to them. Maria employed this strategy during a tense team meeting where her supervisor publicly criticized her report, suggesting she hadn't done adequate research. Rather than defensively listing all the sources she'd consulted or becoming visibly upset, she responded with composed confidence. "Thank you for that perspective. I'd be happy to review the sections you mentioned and provide additional context if needed." Her calm response contradicted the narrative her supervisor was creating, that she was incompetent and emotional. Her grace highlighted his unreasonableness rather than validating it through reactive behavior. Fighting fire with grace requires tremendous self-regulation and inner strength. It means feeling the heat of anger or hurt without being consumed by it. It means honoring your emotions privately while choosing your responses strategically. It means maintaining your moral compass even when others abandon theirs. This approach doesn't guarantee that the narcissist will cease their attacks. In fact, they may initially escalate their provocations when denied the reaction they seek. But over time, as you consistently refuse to engage in their preferred dynamic, many narcissists will reduce their targeting. They typically seek easier sources of narcissistic supply, people who still react strongly to their manipulations. Even more importantly, fighting fire with grace protects your inner landscape. When you respond to toxicity with your own toxicity, you absorb some of that poison into yourself. Each retaliatory action, each vengeful word, each moment of allowing anger to override wisdom erodes your connection to your higher self. Conversely, each moment of choosing grace in the face of provocation strengthens your character and deepens your self-respect. Ask yourself, when was the last time you were provoked into reacting emotionally to a narcissist's behavior? What triggered this reaction? What might have happened if you had responded with calm detachment instead? How would it feel to know that your emotional state is determined by your choices rather than their provocations? When you fight fire with grace, you reclaim your power to choose who you want to be, regardless of how others behave. You demonstrate that while they may have access to your presence in certain contexts, they no longer have access to your peace. Sloth means it's the heaviness of the body. Torpor means it's the dullness of the mind. It is characterized by sleepiness, non-motivation, lack of energy, and oftentimes can manifest itself in a state of depression. Have you ever reached such a state of exhaustion with a narcissist that you've pleaded, "Just tell me what to say, tell me how to say it, tell me how to be, and I will do it"? This desperate request emerges from the maddening experience of having every approach you try somehow twisted and turned against you. This plea reveals a profound truth about narcissistic relationships. They operate on an impossible demand for mind reading. The narcissist expects you to anticipate their needs, wants, and preferences without clear communication. When you inevitably fail at this impossible task, they use your failure as evidence of your inadequacy or lack of care. This dynamic creates a peculiar form of psychological torture. No matter what you say or how you say it, you're wrong. Express your needs directly and you're selfish. Remain silent about your needs and you're withholding. Speak with emotion and you're unstable. Speak calmly and you're cold. The rules constantly shift to ensure your continued failure. You may have noticed that the narcissist never tells you exactly what they want. Even when you explicitly ask, they refuse to provide a clear answer. This isn't accidental, it's strategic. By keeping the target moving, they ensure you remain off balance, constantly guessing, eternally seeking their approval. This impossible demand for mind reading reflects the narcissist's own lack of self-awareness. They often don't actually know what they want. They only know they're perpetually dissatisfied. Their inner emptiness creates an insatiable hunger that no amount of compliance or caretaking can fill. The solution begins with rejecting this impossible game entirely. Stop trying to find the perfect words, the perfect tone, the perfect timing that will finally satisfy them. Accept that their dissatisfaction isn't about your performance. It's about their fundamental inability to experience genuine connection and contentment. Maria finally reached this understanding after months of agonizing over emails to her supervisor. She would draft and redraft, seeking the precise phrasing that wouldn't trigger criticism. One day she realized she was pouring hours into a task that her colleagues completed in minutes. The problem wasn't her communication skills, it was her supervisor's need to find fault regardless of what she wrote. With this realization, she simplified her approach. She wrote clear, professional emails without the exhaustive editing. When her supervisor inevitably criticized something, she acknowledged the feedback without internalizing it. By rejecting the impossible demand for perfection, she reclaimed countless hours and immeasurable mental energy. This rejection of the impossible extends beyond communication to all aspects of the relationship. Stop trying to prove your worth to someone invested in misunderstanding you. Stop trying to earn the respect that should be freely given. Stop trying to create intimacy with someone who uses closeness as a weapon. Instead, redirect your precious life energy toward connections that nourish rather than deplete you. Invest in relationships characterized by mutual respect, clear communication, and emotional safety. Remember what healthy interaction feels like. The ease of being understood, the absence of walking on eggshells, the freedom to be authentically yourself. For those who cannot leave a narcissistic relationship, co-parents, family members, workplace situations, this rejection of the impossible creates an internal liberation even when external circumstances remain unchanged. You stop measuring success by their validation and start measuring it by your fidelity to your own values and boundaries. Ask yourself, how much mental and emotional energy do you spend trying to anticipate the narcissist's reactions? What would become possible if you redirected that energy toward your own growth, healing, and authentic connections? What would change if you stopped seeking approval from someone incapable of giving it consistently? When you reject the narcissist's impossible demands, you reclaim your voice, your integrity, and your right to exist without constant justification. You remember that you were never meant to contort yourself to fit someone else's distorted expectations. You were meant to unfold into the fullness of who you truly are. Now I invite you to turn inward and explore the resonance of these insights within your own experience. What patterns of people-pleasing or self-blame might you need to release to stand firmly in your own truth? How have you been measuring your worth through the eyes of someone incapable of seeing you clearly? What boundaries feel most essential to protect your well-being going forward? Where in your body do you feel the tension of unmet expectations? Can you breathe into that space with compassion? What would your life look like if you stopped trying to prove your worth to someone who profits from your diminishment? How might radical acceptance of what cannot be changed free you to focus on what can be changed? What small step toward reclaiming your power could you take today? The journey of reclaiming your power from a narcissistic relationship is not a single decision, but a daily practice of choosing yourself. Each time you maintain a boundary, each time you refuse to be baited into conflict, each time you honor your perceptions despite gaslighting, you strengthen the foundation of your true self. Remember that your worth has never been dependent on their validation. Your reality remains true even when denied. Your needs matter even when dismissed. Your voice deserves to be heard even when silenced. If you found value in these reflections, please share them with others who might be walking a similar path. Subscribe to join our community of seekers committed to authentic living and self-mastery. Together, we can transform the painful lessons of narcissistic relationships into stepping stones toward greater wisdom, boundaries, and self-compassion. See you next time. Keep your eyes open, your mind curious, and your spirit evolving.